I thought there was going to be like 10 people here. Thank you, first of all, for letting me speak in English. My coworkers all tell me that I talk like I'm 4 if I try to speak Croatian, so this would have been a bad talk if I tried to do that. My name is Vickie Brennan. I work at Jedsy. We're a drone company headquartered in Switzerland. I'm the HR manager. I started as the first drone pilot for Jedsy here in Croatia 2 years ago. We've since grown to about 10 drone pilots, and about 13 of us are here in the technology park. So I'm excited to talk to you today about what it takes to build a startup that's at the intersection of aviation, hardware, software, and regulation. But I just want to find out a little bit about you guys first. Had anybody heard about Jedsy before being in Split? A couple of people? Okay. And how many of you are in technical jobs, like some kind of engineer, something like that? Okay, quite a bit. Okay, good. So that kind of lets me know how to tailor my language. So when you hear about a drone company, what is kind of the first thing that you think of? If you're brave, you can say it out loud, or you can say it in your head.
Right now?
Yeah.
War.
Yeah. Anything else?
I'm sorry.
Right. Okay, good.
Fun video?
Fun? Yeah. Yeah, it's fun. Anything else?
Video.
Okay, good. Yeah. A lot of people use it for that. So I think a lot of people would think about the drone, which is the most obvious representation of our company, and that is our drone flying in Switzerland. You might think of our pilots, drone pilots, the people that fly them. These are some of our drone pilots operating from upstairs. But today I'm going to tell you about kind of all the other things that it takes to build a drone startup that's not quite so obvious. And I like to relate it to an orchestra, where you have many different pieces that have to not only be the best that they can be individually, but they all have to come together in perfect timing. And it's that perfect synergy that really makes it work. So it really only takes one of those things to be a little bit off before it kind of ruins the whole performance. And I think that's kind of how I think about what we're doing at Jedsy. And it's kind of like building 6 different startups all at the same time that have never been done before, and then you're adding them all together in a way that has never been done before. So that's an extra layer of complication. And then it all has to come together with the right timing, and then under this big constraint that everybody, all of you, have to deal with, I'm sure too, which is money and funding. So that's kind of what I'm going to talk about. And then hanging over all of us all the time is this thing that I bring from Silicon Valley, where I'm from, is this famous stat that 9 out of every 10 startups fail. So every day we work against the clock trying to make sure that we're the 1 in 9 that succeeds. Come on in. And most of the time, the reason that startups fail is due to lack of money, lack of runway. So just keep this in your head during everything I talk about, because it underpins everything. And so the first startup we're building in our startup happens to be in aviation. And when you're building a company in the air, that everything happens in the air, it raises the stakes that much greater. And you know from operating a vehicle out on the road that you need to understand the rules of the road. You need to understand how your vehicle performs, how you operate it, what you do in certain circumstances. That's why I've heard it's very hard to get your driver's license here. So you can imagine what it's like to be building a startup when everything you're doing is happening in the air. It starts off with us having to know the rules of the sky. So we have to know what are the aviation regulations if we want to be flying there. We need to know flight principles. What keeps your drone in the air? You know, how do things like headwind, tailwinds affect you? What's elevation? What's the elevation when you're actually already at an elevation in the Swiss mountains? So you have to know a lot of things about that. You have to understand weather. How is weather going to affect the drone? You have to understand how wind patterns form. If you're in, you know, certain conditions, you know, are we likely to get ice? Is a storm likely to pop up? And you have to think about those all the time. And it touches every team. Everybody in our company is needing to do their job with this in mind when they're working on solving problems. And then also it is very highly regulated. It's a, you know, hundreds of year old industry. So the old tech rules of move fast and break things, they don't really like that too much. So it's more like move as slow as you can and be safe. So that is a big part of what we're doing, and you know that always has to be taken into account. A second piece of what we do is route certification. Every customer that we fly for is on a set specific route, and we will fly that route continually. 6 to 9 months of planning for 5 grams of blood for one customer is what it takes. So from the day that a customer will come to our website, let us know they're interested in having us maybe deliver blood samples for them, to the point to where we actually have a drone on site is between 6 and 9 months just to get that route approved. We have a whole certification team that basically will say, okay, you want to go from here to there, and they'll do a complete risk assessment of every single thing on that entire route. So that has everything to do with, let's say, you know, does our path cross railroad tracks? Are there roads? Are there bridges? Is there water? What is the population in these areas? Are there any large gathering of people? Are there any airports that we have to be aware of? What is the air traffic that goes through that? So what's the cell coverage in that area? Because our drones operate on 5G. So all of that they put into that route certification will then go to the European Aviation Administration. They'll have to approve it. And then also to like the local, breaking things. The local authorities will also need to approve it. And so, yeah, you guys all know how long it takes to get even a simple thing done. So that is what we have to do before we can even think about flying a route. And all of that information then will eventually go and become the operating manual for the pilots. So if they ever have any questions about a route, they'll read that before they ever start flying, and it'll let them know everything they need to know. But you can see that, you know, a little snag in this process will push back your customer launch for an indeterminate matter of time. I'm happy to say that Jedsy has worked really hard to become the only drone company in Europe that's able to fly over heavily populated areas. So right now we hold the highest certification that a drone company can get. We're the only ones that have it. We're the first ones that have it. And it's very easy to lose it. So we have to continually keep our systems, our pilot training, our documentation, our hardware, our software, our drone, everything has to be up to standard. And nobody's ever done it before. They just created the framework. So when we have questions or something's unclear, we don't really know, we just have to try, and then they'll come and be like, no, you can't do that. So then we could lose our license to fly if we have any kind of incidents or anything like that. It goes under review, and then we are grounded until it's resolved. So you can see how this can be a pretty big snag in our development, especially when we're trying to go at startup speed. Now the manufacturing piece. So we manufacture all of our own drones. We do that in Malawi. We have a great team of about 25 Malawians there who manufacture our drones. And it's not easy to build a drone from scratch. It's really not easy to build drones from scratch at scale. It takes 3 to 6 months just to get supplies to Malawi. Anybody who's dealt with the Postal Service here can imagine how hard it is to deal with the Postal Service in Malawi. It's very, very rough. It is cheaper to manufacture there. That's why we do it. There's a lot less regulation when we're testing the drones, so that's why we choose to do it there. There's actually a lot of drone companies there. And obviously when you're dealing with supply chains, it's subject to disruptions like war, so we're keeping a close eye on those things. And each drone takes 4 weeks roughly to build and then to test as soon as they manufacture it, which means every wire, every nut, every sealing, it all has to be exactly the same every single time. Then they'll do a certain amount of validation flights on that drone. Then they take it apart, they ship it to Switzerland, they put it back together. Our drone pilots here will then do a certain number of validation flights on it, make sure it was assembled correctly. And then once we're assured that it's good, we'll take it apart again and take it to whatever customer route we need it on. Right now we're flying a few routes in Germany, obviously in Switzerland and Liechtenstein. We are flying in Austria, and this week we actually started doing customer demos for a customer in Taiwan. So you can see how this manufacturing process, like the other processes, if you have one snag somewhere in that, it pushes back your customer launch, and that means no money coming in, and that means you're closer to that, 9 in 10 startups failing. So the software, that's our next thing. I'm not going to talk a lot about software because I think a lot of people understand about the development process of software. I am probably the least qualified person to talk about our software team. They're amazing, but what I will say is, when your code has to be good enough that it flies a drone itself for hundreds of kilometers at 120 meters, and your pilot trusts it enough that your pilot never has to touch the joystick, that's a pretty high bar. And that's basically means that our code was written well and our software team is doing good. And this is what it looks like when they do that correctly. This is at one of our customers in Switzerland, and this is our new patented window landing. So our drone lands at the window and the hospital staff can remove the samples from the back of the drone. So the staff doesn't have to go outside in the rain, the weather. They don't have to stop doing their job for us to deliver the samples. They'll load whatever back in and then we'll take off in the same way. And so when our software team has done a good job, the pilot never touches the joystick. Everything is 100% automated. So to get to that, though, first it takes this. A lot of that. I thought they said something, but yeah. So when you have a bug in your code with hardware, it turns into a lot of money. It's very expensive. So this is an expensive bug chasing. So just like you could imagine, if there's a feature that takes too long, if there's a bug somewhere and you can't catch it, all of that takes time, it's money. We get closer to the orchestra not playing well together. But even if all of those pieces work, you still have to have people. People still are very important to what we do. And then the question becomes, you know, when you're hiring for drone pilots in an industry that is just getting started, where do you go to get 100 drone pilots? They just don't exist. So the way that we needed to innovate in people is we had to pick a place where there was enough talent that was untapped, that had the capacity to be trained, that had skills that we could transfer over. And we were happy to find that here in Split. Turns out that the tourism industry is a really good breeding ground for drone pilots. There's a lot of really transferable skills. When you're dealing with customers, I always say I think that's more stressful than flying a drone. Turns out there's a lot of people here that have dealt with a lot of customers. They're multitasking. They're a lot of times having to deal with big groups of people and keep them safe. Sometimes they're switching jobs a lot. So they're taking in a lot of information about this hotel they work at this year, but next year they're leading a tour group. So that's another whole area of information they have to take in and then apply. So we also have lead times that we have to worry about when training our pilots. The pilot training is about 2 months after they pass their tests and they're able to take in all these flight principles, all these information about the rules of aviation and the stuff that I showed you in the previous slides. Then they can pass their tests, and then the next 4 months is basically on-the-job training where they're really learning how to put all those things together, and they're doing it in a live environment. So I think to get to like a pretty well-trained pilot takes about 4 to 6 months. So whenever we're thinking about launching a customer route, we need to be thinking about, okay, how long does it take for the route to be certified? How long is it going to take to build the drones? Then how long is it going to take to get that many pilots for that many routes? When do we have to start hiring them? And how long is it going to take to train them? And it's really important that we're able to do all that and keep the quality and consistency of their training high, because our certification relies on that, because we can lose it any moment if there's any kind of incident. So you can see how this bad instrument could really make the orchestra not sound good. And so I think, just to reiterate, you can see how these different lead times all have to come together at the right time, because we could have great software and great drone production, but if our pilots aren't ready, then it doesn't really matter. It's going to sit, it's going to push everything back. We can have the route certification, the pilots, the drones, but if the software is not ready, it's not going to work. So any one of these things that's not in sync and our timelines get pushed back, and it costs us money and we get closer to dying. We're basically close to death every week. And this is what it costs. €15,000 a day is our operating costs. So you can imagine how busy our CEO is going out and talking to investors and being like, hey, we're going to put all this stuff together. Want to give us $9 million so we can go crash some drones and try to figure it out. Yeah, so this is what it costs us. And if we're not flying, I always say if we're not flying, we're dying. So yeah, that's pretty much what we do at Jedsy. We're still alive today, and hopefully we will continue. So I hope you know more about the drone industry. And just in case you thought that it was too stressful, I just wanted to show you that we are having fun while we do it. Thank you. Oh, should I ask for a question? Does anybody have any questions? I'll try to answer if I can. Okay, in the black. Oh, there you go. Go ahead.
Yeah, can you tell us a bit more about your background and how did you end up in the drone business?
Yeah, sure. So I've worked in tech probably like 14 years. I worked in San Francisco. I started at a healthcare startup, just like started as like an administrative assistant. They were basically trying to innovate in healthcare by using technology. And so that's where I first got into like tech. I became an operations manager there. I worked at a self-driving car company that was bought by General Motors. We built self-driving cars in San Francisco. So I got to be a couple different things there. I was their first recruiter there. I helped scale them. We went from like 50 people when I joined to like 1,000 when I left. And then I had been in the Navy when I was younger in the military, and I was stationed in Italy, and I like loved Europe. I got to travel around, and I knew I had wanted to come back to Europe at some point. And so when I left the self-driving car company, I was like, okay, I'm going to move back to Europe, and I traveled around, and I just loved Croatia, so I ended up staying here. That was 8 years ago. I should know more Croatian. Don't judge. But yeah, I love it here, and I hope to stay. And I was really excited when I got hired, and I love Split specifically. I love the people here. There's so much talent. So I was so happy when I found out I was going to get to start hiring people into a drone company from Split. So that's kind of about my background. And I started at Jedsy. I was basically like, I'll do anything you want, hire me, like I'll clean the bathrooms. So they're like, okay, well, you can be a drone pilot. And I'm like, what? Like, no, I can't. Like, they hired me and another girl, Matea, who was from Zagreb. She ended up moving down. We were the first drone pilots. We worked out of an apartment in Mertoljak for a year. The first time we flew the drones at Jedsy, they actually didn't know if it was actually going to work to fly them remotely from Croatia. They didn't tell us that until after we did the flight and it worked. So yeah, we kind of operated just her and I out of this apartment flying drones for a year, and we're just like, is this really a company? What is going on? And then all of a sudden they're like, okay, now we're going to start hiring. And so we did, and we hired, I think, like 7 more. We ran out of room in the apartment, and that's when we ended up moving here. But yeah, eventually this will be our biggest office. The plan is to start scaling soon and hire a lot more drone operators. So, okay, go ahead.
I'm curious, how do you find clients? Is like every hospital needs this, or there's like specific?
They actually come to us. We do no marketing. We do almost no outreach. We have like probably 300 big hospitals. I think it's word of mouth, and they like hear about it or see about it and think it's just really interesting. And then they will fill out a form on our website. So we really haven't. We can't keep up with the clients that we have on the wait list, because we're still working on the window landing, perfecting it. But yeah, I think it's like word of mouth and, just being in that industry. And, they're using like a big car, where they're hiring a guy to fly and drive in traffic, and they might be paying him overtime to transport these little vials of blood. And we're like, hey, we can do this cheaper, faster, it's more efficient, it's better for the environment. So yeah, I think it just kind of makes sense, and they see like, yeah, maybe there's money saving there.
Can you speak of any of your plans if this is on the roadmap to bring potentially the hardware building to Croatia from Malawi? Because I'm assuming that with all the geopolitical tensions, granted labor cost there is much cheaper, but would it not make more sense to do it sort of your biggest sites?
Well, I think it would have, but I think, we all know from living here, and once we switched to the euro, it's actually not that cheap here anymore. So I think even our plans when we decided to come here to hire all the drone pilots here was because we needed to be able to fly from somewhere in Europe because we're regulated by the European Aviation Administration, but they didn't want to hire pilots in Switzerland because that would just be like too exorbitant, too expensive. So they're like, okay, well, where can we go where there's a lot of talent, where it's not that expensive to operate, where we can have this be our biggest office? And so Croatia was like first pick on the list. But now the numbers that were used kind of don't really fit since we switched to the euro, you know, and all the prices have gone up. So I think there hasn't really been any real talk about that. Like, I understand what you're saying. And in a lot of ways it would make sense, but I think just financially, it's so much cheaper there. And until we get to a point to where we're solvent, I think later, totally, yeah. But I think until we get to the point to where we're bringing in consistent, not spending that $15,000 a day and not having anything coming in. But yeah, it's definitely hard logistically and with everything.
Have you tried getting any military contracts?
No, we actually have a pretty hard line that we want to do good. I mean, not to say that, you know, depending on what your thing of good is, your definition of good, but I think like we have enough of a challenge just in healthcare, and there's enough of a market in healthcare, and you know, we actually like being the drone company that does good. So I think that's a pretty hard line with our founder, and actually a lot of the people in the company I think just wouldn't want to work here if we were doing anything else.
You couldn't say anyway, even if you did.
I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you. Yeah. I don't think so. I mean, never say never, right? If you need money and you don't want to die, who knows? Maybe we would, or maybe. But our drone is also, I mean, if you see it, it's kind of loud, it's kind of big, it's kind of slow. It's not really, I don't know if they'd really want us. So it's like, but maybe. But I think up until this point, we've kind of been like, we'll just stay over here. I think if we went into any other avenue besides like transporting blood, it would probably be of like cold transport for like organs that need to be transported. Right now, I think they're done with a helicopter if there's like a heart transplant or something. So I think that would be like the next logical route for us.
What skills one pilot needs to have? So how do you pick people? What is there a specific educational profile?
Yeah, I mean, it runs the gamut. I mean, we don't look for, it's not like, oh, you have to have gone to this or you have to have done that. I think it's like, can you deal with, if I push back on you in the interview and I give you a little bit of a hard time, how do you react to that? It's like, what's your reaction style? Are you computer savvy? Like, have you ever seen underneath the operating system? That's a thing. It's like, if we ask you to pull up command line, you don't have to have ever like done anything, but like, are you gonna get freaked out if you have to do something, you know? So are you computer savvy? Video games, all the guys that are probably of a certain age, you played video games, that's a huge help. I wasn't really a video game, and it's like when I see the guys that we're hiring now, like their skills are just like on another level when it comes to the actual mechanics of the flying, and it's from video games. You know, a lot of the skills actually that guys learn playing, I won't say guys only, I know there's a lot of girl gamers, but when you play video games, I think there's a lot of skills that translate. It's also, can you take feedback? One of the questions I ask in the interviews is, you know, tell me a time when you failed at something. And, you know, I want like a real failure, because when our flights are being recorded all the way around, they're recording your screen, they're recording the room, they're recording every single thing. If we have a flight that is even slightly abnormal, it gets posted to our entire company channel, and everybody in the company looks at it, is dissecting it, what happened. We all want to learn from it. And so if you have the kind of ego where like you just can't be told that you made a mistake, or you can't admit to that and then learn, you're not going to be a good drone pilot, because you constantly are having, because you've never done this before. And so you're going to feel incompetent for the first 6 months. So I look for people who can like, who are smart, who get things, but also can like take in feedback and admit their mistakes. And are you just like, cool? Like, do we want you on our team? Yeah. Go ahead.
And how do you handle the failure if the transport was unsuccessful?
How do I handle failure?
As the company, how do you explain it to a customer?
Oh, to a customer. Well, I think when you're at our stage, the customers that we have, they kind of understand like where we are, and that they're as much of the development process as anything right now. And that it's all kind of a like work in progress. I mean, sometimes we have to have a lot of hard conversations and disappoint people, you know, like if, I don't know, like the weather is bad and we can't fly, or if something happens to the drone. But I think they understand that like where we are in our evolution right now, and this is a new industry and it's a new thing. And so luckily, I think like they kind of have been very forgiving if we do have situations like that. The customers are the easy part. It's the authorities that are the tough ones. We've had some really kind of big incidents, and that's always tough. We had, I guess it was a few months ago, before Christmas, one of our pilots in Germany had to make an emergency landing, and he didn't turn his downward camera down and ended up doing an emergency landing on some electric wires that just happened to be there. So that started a fire. The drone caught on fire. The electric wires caught on fire. Like 6,000 people lost electricity or something. This was like I think it was probably like a 4-month thing where we lost our license. We had to put out press releases, and with Germans, it's a whole nother level. Yeah. So I mean, it happens. It's part of the development. Unfortunately, the customers I think are understanding, but the authorities, not so much. Understandably. Mm-hmm.
And who are your clients? Are more public hospitals or private clinics? Do you have any here in Croatia?
We don't have any here in Croatia. It's usually big hospital systems, like in Germany, Asclepios. We have Leiborisch, which is one of the biggest hospital systems in Switzerland. It's usually these big multi-facility, like they have like 10 or 15 different lab places that you can go to. So it's like usually a big system. We have Austria too. So yeah, it's usually like whatever the biggest hospital system in that country is, usually would be a good fit for us.